favorite thing to get from McDonald's?
It's the sausage McMuffin with egg. That's the only thing worth eating from McDonald's.
No, that is false. The best thing worth eating at McDonald's is something you can't get often. You gotta get the McRib, but you gotta add bacon. The McRib by itself is all right. You add the bacon.
Has
heavily.
a little bit of crunch.
It's pretty sad though. Like when you're like probably the most profitable fast food joint in the U.S. and people celebrate the McRib, then you don't even sell the thing. It's nuts.
It looks like we're live. So
hey everyone, a lot to talk about. Everybody's pretty fried anyway because are we officially post E3 or is E3 still going anyway?
Today's the last day.
Yeah.
Today's last show day.
Yeah.
We got to talk about Ryzen 16 core mostly, but there's probably a lot to unpack there. Also Navi and Super.
We have 1 hour or so to do it because we gotta be out of here at whatever time.
We got a meeting, so we're gonna kick this off really soon. Where you're gonna hit this. And
Big Mama's in the house.
We're gonna go, hey, Big Mama.
Friend of the show, Big Mama in the house. Hypnotics, Beat Bass. Yeah.
Damn, didn't blow my
all
nose.
right.
Skype.
Yeah, Skype is everything. We've
All right.
come to expect of years of Skype service. That's
Skype's
one of the
here
best
for
lines.
you.
I hope they use that in that. Is that a remake of Men in Black?
No,
I'm not
it's a
No, it has
sequel.
it's a sequel.
Oh, okay.
It's the dumb name, Men in Black International. I don't really understand the name, but whatever.
Did they move from New York? I thought the whole premise of it was based in New York.
No, maybe that's why it's called international, because they're kind of going around the world.
Oh, I see.
Who knows?
Yeah, that makes sense because it's a
Big Nesh
galactic
here,
scale movie. So
Jerry
yeah,
here,
we care about one.
Adrian
place.
here. Yo, Adrian.
I just
Men
saw
in
a trailer
Black 3.
for Godzilla. It looks all right, actually. Like, not great.
I
but
liked
something
the-
to watch in the summer.
I like the last one.
Men in Black 3, I think, fixed everything. It's amazing. You would not think. Because Men in Black 1 was awesome. Men in Black 2 was like, oh my God. That was like, ooh. Killed the whole franchise. It's like Ghostbusters 2. Then they actually came back years later and made Men in Black 3, and it was good. They should have learned something from that Ghostbusters franchise.
Hey, and Moses is here, and finally in time to watch live. Welcome, Moses. All right, let's kick it off. We got lots to talk about.
Okay.
So
We
let's
do.
do it.
All right, yeah, I've already derailed this.
I'm
Okay.
ready.
In this episode of The Full Nerd... Okay. What the hell am I going to say this? There we go. In this episode of The Full Nerd, 16-core Ryzen is here. Was it worth the wait for Navi and NVIDIA's super blocking move?
Oh, that's louder than usual. Whoops.
It is. I was wondering if it was just me.
I hear nothing still.
Welcome to The Full Nerd, episode 96. I'm your host, Gordon Mong, with Brad Churkus, co-host.
Hello, Internet.
Elaine E is here
Hi, everybody.
with the bun that is blocking her headphone.
Thanks for outing me, Gordon.
Yeah. Well, you said that. I was like, what? Like, I was expecting Princess Leia buns. And Adam Patrick Murray controlling the vertical and horizontal.
I'm trying real hard not to drink all this Respawn by Razer, but
Dude,
I'm
you have
kind
been
of.
pushing that on everybody
And
in
he's
the
been
office.
drinking it. He's
I
been
have
drinking it.
I have legitimately been drinking it.
Did you drink all the pineapple flavor? Because that's a good one.
No, actually, I have not. I tried the watermelon one inside of a watermelon hint. Yesterday, I also tried the cherry hint with the blue raspberry. All
I
of them
do
are
think
pretty
it's
good.
interesting how you're trying to make these pairings like it's some gourmet thing. Well, if you have a little of this, bring out the flavor of this. Notes, settle after this amount of time.
Yeah, and then you get just enough of a cup of coffee for something to get you a little bit of a jolt. I needed it. It's been warm in the Bay Area, so
Oh my God.
we've been dying.
Oh God. I
Anyway,
was lying on the floor yesterday like a beached whale.
I have a rock star like a pleb.
you are a rock star, Brad. You are a rock star.
Steady and dependable.
You know who else is a rock star? I would say Lisa Sue. Kind of a rock star
good segue.
earlier this year, or
good.
earlier this week.
She does command the stage very well.
Yeah.
I have to say that seeing her in person a few times, and then really she brings the energy. Some people are like, oh, why is she yelling so much? Just like, because she got, 16-core CPU or something in her hand. Wouldn't you be yelling? I'd be yelling too. See, I segued there too.
Do
Ryzen
it.
16
Yeah.
core.
It's here.
Yeah, it's
We,
finally here after so many rumors, so many so much playing with our emotions. Where's it going to be first? Then wasn't it predicted to be here at CES first?
Yeah.
No, yeah, CES. It basically was like every single next tech event, you know.
Yeah, of course.
CES, Computex, some other one, MWC, I don't know.
No,
And
GDC.
then it got announced at a game.
Oh yeah,
event.
GDC.
WWDC.
WWDC.
Just kidding.
So, but it is here. And, you know, for people who don't know, I will give you the quick rundown. Ryzen 9 3950X, 16 cores, 32 threads, you know, SMT, 4.7 gigahertz boost, 3.5 gigahertz base, 72 megabytes of total cache, 105 watt TDP. That's actually very impressive, too.
Available in September.
Available in September. So, you know, it won't be available for, we haven't even actually benchmarked the 12, 8, 6 core versions of Ryzen 3000s, but people are already leaking benchmark results for the 3950X, supposedly.
So how's it look?
Yeah. Well, what are they claiming, and what are people rumoring?
You know, WCCF Tech had this morning. I don't know where they originally got the scores from. Sorry, whoever originally got the score, but they're showing Geekbench basically hammering an 18-core part, I think is what the narrative, what I saw this morning. So basically beating a 9980XC, 18 cores in single multi-threaded workloads in Geekbench. So,
Geekbench.
I know. So that's one thing
I
I'm
was
like,
wondering who was going to say it first.
I mean, that's the one thing that bugs me about this. Again, yet another, you know, so-called leak and the hype building for the next part. And the last few months, I just feel really kind of turned off by people driving narratives with leaks. And I don't know if they're real or not or what it is. But Geekbench is useful as a tool in certain circumstances. I'm not so sure it's the very best multi-threaded benchmark tool. I mean, it's great for phones. And one of the complaints about Geekbench 3, the Geekbench 4 got made it a lot better, but Geekbench 3, you know, I'm none other than Linus Torvald, creator of Linux, was saying this benchmark is basically trash because it's so small, it fits all within the cache of a CPU, right? It doesn't, it's not, basically it's a useless benchmark and doesn't measure anything relatable that you would see in real world use. Geekbench, in their defense, they said, well, you know, we are basing our algorithms on, you know, real world algorithms. They're kind of small, but they thought that their feeling is a lot of applications, a lot of software was going to very small loops, is what they're saying, very hot loops. But Geekbench 4 kind of corrected that. Intel has also a long time taken shots at using Geekbench for measuring anything. Previous versions, not the latest version, they used to say, like, the most ridiculous thing about this benchmark is you would run it on a phone, and it would run in like 5 seconds, right? Because people don't want to watch their phone run for 10 minutes. And then you'd run it on, at the time, an 8-core, you know, or 6-core Core i7 part, and it would take like 2 minutes. So, and then it was like, why is it taking 10 seconds on a phone? And this is not even with the new ARM parts. Why is this taking so damn long on the PC? And it was like, oh, because the workloads are different. Like, what? Well, what kind of a benchmark are you having cross-benchmark, cross-platform that the workloads are different? So they tried to...
So take Geekbench numbers with a grain of salt.
Take it with a grain of salt, basically.
Salt mine.
I have no doubt that the 16-core part is going to be an incredible part when it comes out. Well, you know, got to wait for tests, of course. But, I mean, really, it's going to look like a pretty damn fast part, unless you hit memory bandwidth intensive things, because it only has 2 channels. But I think I just don't like this kind of like, we haven't even tested the parts that we're going to get soon, and we're already moving on to the hype over the next part based on leaks, you know? People just get their... it just bugs the hell out of me.
Wait, how does this happen?
Gordon, you're sounding an awful lot like me right today.
Well, because
He's tired.
I saw directly at Computex where I was shown some, you know, information. I was told it was on background, just for us to help us guide stuff, and then I saw that leak, and I don't know whether that was intentionally leaked on purpose in order to make people think one thing, or whether it was just simply somebody gave it to somebody. So I don't know anymore, and I really just don't like. And I did a whole thing with Steve at Gamers Nexus. That's why I'm using his free mug today. That, you know, it feels like we're just being used to drive narratives from all the parties now. I mean, I know that's always happened before, but there were legitimate leaks from hardware partners just excited or they didn't care. You know, if you're a hardware partner, And people don't know, like, oh, why would a hardware partner of NVIDIA, Intel, or AMD leak something? It's like, because they're being passive aggressive. It's like, we're sick of you just telling us what to do. And, they just, I can see it happening. We're just like, it's just intentionally leaked,
Well, we got a question from, whoops, I lost
But not
it.
to derail. Go ahead, ask a question.
No, this isn't to derail. Loose Tooth on YouTube's asking, what's the chance that Ryzen 3000 is released and it is not all that people are expecting?
It's hard to say. My feeling is no, right?
I mean, that's a bad look for them.
We're not wearing these red shirts on purpose.
No, I just wanted to wear something with cats today. This is my only real cat shirt. I just feel like it's that is a nice thing about tech reporting, where it's like you have benchmarks to fall back on, right? Like, it is, if you are off the mark compared to everybody else, that means something went wrong, or you're really just testing in a way that doesn't line up with everybody else. So for AMD to go on stage, for AMD to actually put benchmarks up, for them to be wildly off of that in real world testing would be a very, very deep, dark black mark on them.
Yeah, it really, and you don't know this, but a lot of people who do work the marketing side of these companies, they understand that credibility matters, because when you continually lie to people about how things perform, especially people who review these things, at some point people are like, yeah, whatever, right? That they're full of it most of the time. So
yeah.
And recently, I mean, all these companies do weird things. Sometimes they're trying to show their product in the best light. So sometimes that involves being some weird, niche benchmark in this, edge case or whatever. But in general, recently, I feel like AMD, NVIDIA, and aside from that one weird third-party testing methodology with Intel, I think the actual things provided by all the manufacturers recently have been pretty spot on. I don't think any of them have been reaching too hard recently.
Yeah, and the benchmarks they showed during the presentation were, things that are very repeatable, very common, easy to replicate.
And then one thing I do want to say is, and we brought it up on the end of the live cast. I don't know if you watched it. We did a stream.
No, I didn't get a chance to watch it. Sorry. Yeah.
No one did watch it. No one wants to go back here and rewatch everything. But I will
check it out on YouTube.
All the benchmarks that we saw were the most impressive for me. The parts that we're going to get sooner, the 9 and 7, 957 parts.
The lower end ones.
The lower end parts is 1080p gaming. Looks like they're close enough to Intel to it don't matter, right? So that's actually very exciting.
Close enough. Yeah.
Close enough. There's some things where they're a little bit faster too.
And some things where they're a little bit slower. So it's just they're pretty much on parities there.
Yeah, and it was that I think that's a big news here. Why the part came out at E3 is because that one thing that is always hanging around Ryzen is like, oh yeah, but you're 15 to 20% slower than Core. They're saying no, we're not. So all those benchmarks, as well as any content creation benchmarks, were run without the fixed scheduler in the new version of Windows. So they did intentionally run the core parts with MCE off, which I personally think is unfair to Intel. It's sort of kneecapping Intel, but they also ran their own numbers without the scheduler fix. So I don't know how it's going to end up. You got to figure if maybe MCE gives Intel parts 5% more, and they get 5% more, maybe even more. Possibly they're implying a little more than that from the fixed scheduler. I think it's going to come out to match what they're setting. Their expectations, I think, are setting things a little bit lower than where it's going to land when it hits. I hope how
that would be the smart move.
I can understand why they test with it off too, though. I mean, like both AMD, with that being the case, both of them should come out a little bit better theoretically in the future. And I think, I mean, both, the latest version of Windows and MCE, is something you can't guarantee that every chip will have. So I can understand why they're testing without all those things.
Also, we're saying that, or at least Big Mama's saying that it doesn't have some of the mitigations for the stuff. So that's also
it's hard to say. Most of those don't seem to hit gaming performance though. Mm-hmm. I mean, from what I've seen, who knows? There's always new mitigation of the week, but for the most part, they don't affect the game march too much. But yes, those were not included as well. So there's sort of like a lot of things that sort of could add up to it being even faster than what we're seeing.
Also, noob question from me, but does MCE Auto vary depending on motherboard manufacturer?
Yeah, it's all different probably on motherboard manufacturer and probably model to model on motherboards. I have seen it on budget motherboards, so you have the feature. but maybe the VRMs can't put out as much power, so they're going to be a little more conservative. So maybe that MCE isn't as good as the MCE Auto that they're pushing on the higher end boards.
Makes
So
sense.
I can understand why they have it off. Then
Yeah, but
it's hard. It's hard to establish a baseline if it's always going to be changing.
But there is no baseline. Is
True.
really my argument. There is no actual real baseline is the issue. So
But that's one of the things you're going to be looking into,
Yeah.
right?
I would just
That's your
say
job, yeah.
it's our job to
Wait
figure
for
that out.
reviews.
Yeah, wait for reviews. Don't pre-order.
Too late.
Yeah, too late. But I will say in the APU parts,
Oh yeah, that's a slightly different
that's a
story.
different thing because it's the older 12 nanometer parts. They're still good in the graphic side, but
I was disappointed when I heard that.
that they didn't
To
do
talk
7
about it,
nanometer.
I don't.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, see you're that person I was talking to when I wrote about the people like, what? I don't get the most expensive brand new TSMC 7 nanometer process in my
Look.
$99 CPU. I am so outraged.
I didn't say outrage. I just said I was a little disappointed. It would have been nice.
Why didn't you give us?
You weren't the
most-
only one. You weren't the only one.
Look,
I-
I
but
would
come
have been
on.
willing to pay a little bit more to get the newer process. That's all I'm saying.
I
Me.
don't.
I'm willing to pay a little bit more.
I think, yeah.
But
Yeah.
they still called it 3,000. Sorry, I missed this
think-
news.
I think
yeah.
that's why it's confusing to me that they brought up the number so that it's supposed to be part of this generation, but it's using last quote unquote
Well,
last
They-
generation.
They did that last gen too, and I found it confusing when they first
Yeah.
started.
Yeah,
it's
and
just it makes things really muddy.
well, I mean, to be honest, though, model numbers mean absolutely nothing anymore.
I
They
know
mean nothing.
that's why it's frustrating.
There was a point where I actually asked Intel specifically, "What does generation mean?"
I know.
Because like, what? Why is this a 6th gen Skylake part? What the hell does that even mean? Oh well, it's based on the graphics core. Because in fact, because I always thought it was like, well, Core i7 was like 1st gen, the first Nehalem parts. No, those didn't have graphics. We actually only started counting when we included graphics. And was it Arendelle, Clarkdale? Oh, okay, makes sense. And then it pretty much was like, well, why is this a 9th gen part? Well, it goes to 11. Then
It's got a
went to
9.
10. It's like there's like you mean literally there's just higher clocks, a little slightly bent as a different generation part.
I know.
Yeah, pretty much. It
Right.
doesn't mean anything from any of these folks.
But I mean, at least you do get a little bit of clock speed bump on
Yeah.
the APUs.
You get a clock speed on the AP parts, but I want to get into the benchmark discussion because on all the Ryzen 975s, like Cinebench, Blender, blah blah blah, APUs. Here's spec. It's like you're using spec VPerf, which is like that's like workstation level. Like, oh well, people do use this. I do believe somebody is running workstation level applications on an APU, but why don't you show also the other benchmarks you showed for your other CPUs here? Well, yeah, you can guess that's because it would make you look bad. I mean, companies don't like to show benchmarks that make them look bad, right? I mean, that's part of that whole which is a little bit of a bummer. But I know they're not going to come out and say you're like, yeah, the 6-core Coffee Lake part's going to be faster than our quad-core part.
The tricky thing about those APUs is that they do have the Radeon cores, right? Like, even if Intel does manage to beat it in raw computing tasks, if you're buying a $99 chip and you can play games with it without a discrete GPU,
Sure.
I mean,
it's still awesome.
that's great.
It's still, it's a nice upgrade. It would have been beautiful to get 7 nanometer, but you got for 7.
I know.
It's always the leftover parts, I was interested on the previous 2 APUs, they were paste thermal interface materials, paste TIMs, and this new one, the bottom end part is still the Elmer's glue, and then the upper end one is actually a very nice.
So the $99 part.
It's actually pretty good. I mean, people get a little too
what you
worked up
call
about it
Elmer's
sometimes.
glue.
It's not the most expensive, but there was actually a test. I don't know, it was a non-tech did, and it was like they actually tested liquid metal and the original APUs with just the Elmer's glue stuff was like, oh, it's actually as good as some of the very good thermal paste, or the very good stuff. But of course, liquid metal was better. Liquid metal is a pricier, more difficult to deal with. So, although talking about benchmarking, I want to ask you now, because I think the other thing that's very interesting with this launch, with the fact that Ryzen 3000s, definitely the 39, we have not seen any performance benchmarks from the 16-core part officially, but the Ryzen 9 3900X, the Ryzen 7 3800X, and the 3700X, we've all seen they go toe to toe with their Intel counterparts, price counterparts in gaming.
And they showed demos on the.
And they showed demos, but Brad, they ran the benchmarks at 1080p. So they're like, hey, look, 1080p performance, high-end graphics card.
Too high.
What?
Resolution's too high. They should have gone with 720.
No, but I remember the outrage over the original Ryzen launch with 1080p gaming. People were like, why are you running 1080p with, a 1080 Ti card or 1080 card, right? Everybody was like, that's insane. You're just doing that to make AMD look foolish, right? Remember that?
Yeah, it was silly at the time. People were saying that had no idea what they were talking about.
I want to note, though, are those folks who were just so angry that 1080p was used are going to come out and say, yeah, this is awesome now, right? Shouldn't they be sticking to the same line? Like, this is ridiculous. I don't even care about this, right?
I only want to start time.
Are they going to be consistent with their feeling that we are all so full of crap to run 1080p gaming benchmarks and now say, this is valid? Because that to me looks like you're only saying that because you want to make your team look better, right?
I feel like the root of your question is, are people who are responding out of emotion still going to respond out of emotion? I think the answer is yes. So in this case, because they're looking for something that makes their team look great, they probably will answer in a way that aligns with that and not necessarily be consistent with what they said previously.
One of the funny things to me when that whole thing came up is like, if you look at the Steam hardware survey, something like some ridiculous percentage of monitors are 1080p or lower, like 80 or 90%. Like, that's the number that matters, 1080p.
Right. Yeah.
And especially for the demo, where they showed the streaming at the same time. Like, I mean, you're not going to be running 4K or even 1440 and streaming that at the same time. Like 1080 is a lot more realistic.
Yeah. And, and I do think there is one valid point that I think came up at that time and I actually made sure I did it because it's like, I can't get on this high horse unless I did it myself. But I ran 1080p on the original Ryzen launch test, and I ran 1600p because I was using 1610 panels, but 1440p essentially. So I ran it. It's like, yeah, look, Ryzen is 20%, 25% slower than the equivalent Intel part at the time. I don't remember what it was. Was it Kaby Lake?
Yeah.
But when you that's with a 1080 card. When you moved up to 1600p, 1440p, it just, everything turned into GPU limited. Even on older games, it just turned into GPU limited tests. It didn't matter. So I was like, look, it is slower at 1080p. 20% is a lot, right? But at 1600, 1440p, where you would be using your $500 graphics card to play games, it didn't matter. So I think that's fair. You got to point that out. But I think I just want to rub it in the faces of the people who said 1080p gaming performance was just like some kind of vast, conspiracy by everybody.
Today we learned that Gordon holds year-long grudges.
Well, it just needs to be pointed out because, when you're wrong, we get called on all the time because we're wrong all the time. It's cool. At the same time, people got maybe we were being just excessive about,
Yep.
I'm looking for my apology.
AMD's at the time, AMD's marketing played heavily into that, and people just took it up.
Well, yeah,
Also, Gordon, I'm sorry, but it was also just announced this week that consoles can do 8K now. So,
oh really?
PCs are lagging behind if you're only going to do 1080.
I was paying attention to hardware that mattered. What did actually happen with the consoles?
So
they teased the new Xbox.
Yeah. They said up to 8K performance.
It's the exact same as the PlayStation, basically.
Yeah.
The basic specs that PlayStation teased, Xbox also teased.
On Verizon and Navi.
Well, I think it does turn into, and I'm just sort of thinking of all the demonstrations I saw at AMD recently. Doesn't this really come down to what is the meaning of 8K? Depends. I got to work on that one.
Yeah.
It'll play.
Usually you're pretty good at that one.
It'll play 8K video.
Yeah, that's my guess.
Also,
too.
it might upscale to 8K.
That's what I think it is. I think what it is it's internally upscaled to 8K. It's going to look awesome.
Of course.
Because one of the things AMD was heavily showing off was look at our, they basically were saying, look at DLSS. Look how horrible this looks. We think they're scaling these whatever textures at very low resolutions, and I forget what the actual feature was. Was it their Was it the Radeon image sharpening?
Yeah.
Or was it the fidelity thing?
It might have been. There was fidelity. There was sharpening. There was actually all kinds of cool stuff on the software side. Oh, are we? Well, that's sort of the next thing.
Oh yeah, that's the next thing. Come on, don't even. What are you talking about there? Anyway,
is there
16 cores. I actually
16 cores.
Yeah, we Big Mama in the Full Nerd Discord. If you want to hop in on Discord, we got plenty of stuff going over there. He's asking about can you give more info on the new auto overclocking on the 3600? There's a slide for the 3600 that shows a 200 megahertz boost.
Yeah, I think
the auto overclocking.
It's their PBO, whatever, precision boost over whatever. It's their auto. It's sort of like Intel's. If I read it right, there was an incredible amount of information jammed into our brains in one day.
Yeah.
It's very similar to Intel's thermal velocity boost, whatever. Basically, if the chip is running cool enough, it'll run 200 megahertz higher. I believe.
And that's been Ryzen's, one of their features. Basically, from the beginning, they've just been refining it in every generation.
Yeah. So now they're 7 nanometer, and things are pretty awesome. So they're getting more. I mean, they were very impressed. They were very impressed that they were able to get more clocks, because they're saying, you go 14 to 12 to 7. Every time you keep making the wires smaller, it's harder to push electrons through it, right? You increase the resistance. They say we're still getting more clocks out of it. It's interesting. If you look at Intel's 10th gen Ice Lake part, is that it? Ice Lake U. Those are laptop parts, so they're not desktop parts, but they're actually much slower than what they got out of Whiskey Lake. So Whiskey Lake, Whiskey Lake U parts were like, I don't know, 4 gigahertz, 4.5, 4.6. I mean, they were way up there. So the new Ice Lake parts are like 4 gigahertz. Mm-hmm. They make up a lot of it because of their IPC increase in that Ice Lake part. But you're like, why is Whiskey Lake 4.6 gigahertz and why is Ice Lake 4 gigahertz? Maybe this is kind of the thing that AMD was talking about. It's like you keep shrinking the wires down, you keep increasing the resistance. I don't know what the actual reason for that is. They didn't tell me. So on the Intel side, but it does look like they're getting very decent clocks, and the PBO probably going to be more effective with this generation as well.
Also, we have a tweet that Whiskey Omega, a friend of the show, Whiskey Omega, had put in our Discord from Robert Halleck of AMD. It was some sort of thread, but the tweet that they embedded is just something he said. Ryzen doesn't have a single core turbo clock. Our boost algorithm pursues the highest possible clocks on as many cores as possible until you hit some sort of limit, whether it's socket power, core temps, VRM, whatever. So, and I know there's a lot of talk about the 16 core part, because what would it say, 4.7 was the
4.7,
yeah,
4.7 turbo.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are wondering about, like a single core, multiple core. What do we think for such a high end part?
I think it's one of those things where we'll have to get closer to the launch before we get more information about it. Yep. But it is 4.7 turbo or whatever, 4.7 boost. 3.5 base. Their base is probably, it's interesting because I'm thinking back to Ryzen 2, right? Or Ryzen 2000s, where they pretty much ran near their boost most of the time. But I can't even, my brain is still trying to recover. I'm going to expect you'll be running it most of the time over 4.7, right? Because, or not over 4.7, but up above 4. So it's going to be a very decently clocked part. And the 3950X does actually have higher clocks than the 3900X, but 100 megahertz higher boost. But it's probably not going to happen on all cores. This is kind of what we see on Intel Xeon parts, or even on the Core i9s, where you have you get 18 cores where the turbo is insane, 5 gigahertz, but the base is very low because the base is the way it works on Intel land is base is like, oh, things are really going wrong. You use toothpaste instead of a good, insulin. There's just everything's, or your pump stopped working, all this kind of things. Their base clock is worst case scenario. So if this holds true for this, they didn't get into that detail. We probably just didn't ask, but
they didn't. But I do feel like the order in which they're listing the clocks now are an indicator probably of what they want to make everyone think about their clocks. So they put the higher one first because I think what they're trying to say is like you're probably going to get something a little bit closer to this over what you're getting for the base.
Yeah, it feels like it, right? Oh, I don't have the clocks listed on this other slide. But for the other line, 12 core, 8 core, 2 8s, These are just, we don't need to go over them. Everybody knows all these prices. And all
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, I will say that if people want to hear us do more discussion about like pricing, who we think the 16 core part is for, all that, we did do that right after the live stream.
Yeah.
On our like live cast sort of commentary.
Yeah, check it out on YouTube. We do have some people, just to wrap up the CPU stuff, we do have some people talking about the Threadripper rumors this morning. About the 64 core.
There's not going to be a Threadripper. They didn't have on that slide one presentation at some point in the internet, and it didn't it's not going to happen,
We
right?
talked about this already.
Yeah,
Did we?
We did.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. And then at Computex, Lisa Sue, said, of course.
She's like, what? What the? She's like, this is the one thing that kind of bugs me. This is the thing that always turns Brad off, but now it's really bugging me because this is like we have become, and I'm very angry about this. We have become like the NBA sports media, where you're just like, you got nothing to talk about, so you just make stuff up and talk about anything at all, any little facet, and it's just like. So they didn't. It's like they didn't have this one slide. So the internet immediately said, "Oh, ain't no Threadripper. Ain't not making one." Yeah, we weren't even talking about Threadripper. We were talking about microphones or something like that. Well, you didn't have Threadripper on there. Not going to happen. I mean that is. I mean, there should be some responsible response from the media if you're actually responsible to just simply just chase these crazy rumors and then just inflame people and like.
I'm just going to say that Gordon has been saying that he's a little burned out. Burned out Gordon is feisty Gordon.
No, I was like, oh my God, yeah, you're right. They didn't have that on a slide. What does that mean? What? And it's crazy. This is not just AMD. This is all tech companies. It's all NBA teams. Well, how come he's not out here? What? He should be, it's just everybody just jumps to the conclusion, the worst possible conclusion, or just any conclusion at all if there's not actual information. It's a human thing, right? If there's a vacuum of lack of information, people just make stuff up and then they run with it.
It's no different than phenomenon when you see someone and they don't appear at something with their significant other. They're like, did they break up?
Yeah.
Did they break up?
Yeah, and she got the flu, right? But I don't. Yeah, I don't.
By the way, Gordon, I have this new game called Jump to Conclusions.
Is it a map?
Yeah, you like stand at the end and then you make a decision.
It's interesting, Adam, because a lot of people think. Like, we're really smart, but what we are is hardware reviewers, and what we do mostly is we talk to the engineers.
Smart.
We go and talk to the engineers.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and so you're not getting the whole Office Space?
I don't remember that part.
Oh, come on.
The engineer part? No, sorry. They're
talking to them like, oh, what exactly do you do?
Oh, I go talk to the engineers. Okay.
I talk to the engineers, and the customers, you physically bring the documents to the engineer. No, my secretary does that. Well, what is it you do here? Right? Come on, that's a classic Office Space scene.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
Millennials need to watch that movie.
Office Space still holds up really, really well. But before we, run out of too much time, let's get some Radeon, some Navi. There were a lot of people waiting for Navi, and then some people had some thoughts.
Many thoughts.
Not
all favorable.
Was it worth the wait? Brad, you want to kick this off? I honestly don't remember all of the.
I have been super busy with E3 this week, so I don't have probably as much super deep technical things as some people, but I have the basics here. Basically, Navi is here using the new RDNA architecture that AMD just introduced. The first version, there's going to be two forms. The Radeon RX 5, how do they pronounce that?
5700 XT.
5700 XT is the full featured one. It's $450. It has 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, so not HBM, not GDDR5, the same thing as you'll find in the RTX series. And AMD says that this card will potentially beat the RTX 2070 in performance for $50 less. Obviously, or not obviously, but does not have ray tracing technology, unlike NVIDIA's cards. There's a second GPU called the Radeon RX 5700 non-XT, so there's no XT on it. It has a little bit fewer, compute unit stream processors, etc.
Yep.
Yeah, but it still has 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, and it's priced at $380. AMD's numbers show it beating the RTX 2060 in a bunch of games, but it does cost about $20 more.
Yeah. And then they're both 6-pin, 8-pin power. A lot of their slides they showed the Mayday had 2 8-pins. So they told us that, oh, those are just engineering boards. That was an incorrect render, but we saw engineering boards with 2 8-pins. Mm-hmm. But they will say shipping cards will have 8 and 6.
An interesting thing about these is that AMD actually touted them or unveiled them using a new terminology called game clock.
Yes. Yes.
So they'll have a base clock, and they list the base clocks. They have a boost clock, which is apparently, short bursts, like we were talking about with the processors. Like if you're just doing something real quick, it needs like a quick oomph. That's what the boost clock is by AMD's terminology. Game clock, somewhere in the middle, is what you can expect to find in the majority of games. Yeah. So a good way to think of it, that's how NVIDIA refers to its boost clock. Oh. So game clock for Radeon is equal to boost clock for NVIDIA, basically.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. There was definitely a lot of sort of confusion when they talked about this feature to us. It's like, is game clock really just a throttling mode?
Well, I look at it like NVIDIA's cards, even though they have a certain boost clock rating, they will actually go higher in practice. Like if you're playing a game that's not the most strenuous or you're doing different tasks, it'll go way above the boost clock if it's able to. That's what this new game clock's going to be. But the rated boost clock is just short, bursty things would be my guess.
For AMD, yeah.
For AMD.
For very light things. And then the base clock is, worst case scenario, running for a mark or something, what they're saying.
Yeah.
Do you think that makes sense? And they basically said the game clock will be based on, a suite of games that they think is valid.
Okay, that sounds reasonable to me. Mostly because AMD uses its, like, NVIDIA will bust out Quadros and it'll bust out GeForce cards, and they'll have different things for each market. Radeon tends to have these GPUs and use them in all different sorts of markets. So I think it makes sense for them to kind of differentiate that way. It makes sense. It is confusing having different terminologies used by AMD and NVIDIA, but it makes sense.
Well, yeah, it's like AMD's TDP isn't the same as Intel's TDP. Intel's TDP is what they kind of average what it should be running at, and then AMD's TDP is like absolutely maxed out kind of thing in the past. I don't know if that's going to hold true now, but
and obviously, I didn't get into it originally, but these Radeon cards, they also they're built on 7 nanometer, just like the Ryzen CPUs, and they support PCIe 4.0 if you do pick up one of those Ryzen CPUs with the Next 570 motherboard. So there's all kinds of cutting-edge tech in it.
Yeah, and the one thing for the PCIe 4.0, they have shown the difference in graphics performance using a FeatureMark feature test in 3D Mark. Realistically, we've talked about it before many times. It's not going to make that much of a difference in today's games at the games settings people use. But they did actually have a cool demo. I need to update the PCIe story that I wrote actually a couple weeks ago that shows it was DaVinci Resolve pushing 8K streams, and they had basically a PCIe 4.0 Radeon card, and they could switch between PCIe 4 and PCIe 3, and you really could not in this DaVinci Resolve test show it would kill the PCIe 3 card, whereas on the PCIe 4 card, it was made I think it was like 40% faster or something like that. It was it was actually in a more useful use case scenario. I could see content creators, if you're doing this, I really do need PCIe 4. And there was a little bit of confusion that you may see in other stories because in their briefing, they thought it was really because of the PCIe 4 SSD that was helping the streaming test. But and that's what they told us in the briefing. Yeah, some of it could be from the PCIe 4 SSD, but then I saw the demo and I spoke to the person. He's like, oh, no, this is running on PCIe 3 SSD. So this is not just because we have a PCIe 4 SSD, that Phison based one, but it is coming off of the PCIe 3 as a WD Black drive going into memory and then going into the card, I guess. So it was definitely... It was a real result. It's very important, very important. So it wasn't just simply bottlenecked by the SSD. they're showing that you for content creation tasks, 8K, extremely high resolution video files, it's going to make a difference. We'll see. I mean, it is something made by Resolve, probably to show off bandwidth. Are they going to make this a general feature in Resolve? I don't know. Is Adobe ever going to support it?
Nope.
I don't know. So, but at least it's a better argument for it.
Well, sorry to derail this, but we have a friend of the show, Steve from Gamers Nexus, here in the chat with us. What's going on, Steve? He's not trolling. He's actually wants to point out. You used the cup and you summoned Steve.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, I guess. He says that we should be calling out the fact that on the video that you two did together over on Gamers Nexus, that you called the pricing. You got it correct.
I was amazing, right? I was thinking, I should like. Because I said the 5700 XT would be $450, and I said the 5700 would be, God, what the heck? I don't remember, because I was like, it feels like a month ago.
I mean, if you nailed it,
I was
you could have
close.
said 380.
I think I was like $20 off on the 4700. I said it would have been nice if it came in at 350, but that's sort of like wishful thinking.
You got the original Ryzen pricing right too, man. Maybe AMD just waits to see what your predictions are.
But
based on
Steve
that,
ran that after. So we recorded that down there under embargo. He ran it after, and then AMD released the prices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was watching. I didn't get all the way through it yet, but I was watching that video last night. And you guys both even said, like, we're recording this before we have prices. We're just gonna start taking some guesses.
I've been very wrong on prices, but you only remember the ones you got right. I remember my favorite was that SSD one, where it's like I basically landed the price of the SSD, 1 terabyte SSDs, like basically within a week of them hitting that price. That was impressive. But I don't know. It kind of felt right, I mean, maybe I'm just kind of used to being batted around by all these companies, and the maneuvering seems very clear to me how they're going to maneuver against each other.
Well, it's interesting because like we also have people in the chat kind of from both ends saying like, hey, I was expecting something more higher end. I wish Navi would compete with the 2080 Ti, and then some people saying, oh man, AMD's always been about budget. How come they didn't come in lower than that? What do we think?
Is everybody upset? No. Budget. Let's hear from the budget representative. The chair recognizes the budget contingent of PCs.
I think this is a good place to start, man. I think Vega's kind of long in the tooth. Like, it's real hard to suggest Vega parts right now. You can find them on sale sometimes. Radeon 7 exists. It's still the top end part. So Radeon 7 still exists. I'm not sure if there's any stock. There was not any stock of Radeon 7 at all for months. I haven't checked in a while. But it makes sense, starting from the top down. That's a solid midsection. The thing is, right now, the Radeon RX 570 and 580, I mean, it's a few years old process. I'm sure they make them real cheap. They sell them real cheap. They are like the Radeon RX 570 and 580 are where they are beating the crap out of NVIDIA right now, down at that lower end. I can understand why they would want to reinvigorate this high-end, mid-range, I guess you would call it.
Yeah.
But, it makes sense to me.
570 is going for like, what, 115, 120 on sale now?
Yeah, with 2 free games.
It's pretty stunning how much value you get, even though the card, the technology's older. The one question we had on this live cast stream, was it Tuesday, Brad, that I kind of wish you'd been able to answer a question. Somebody asked, would you buy a Vega 64 or would you get one of these cards?
Oh, yeah.
And we talked about it, but I was kind of curious what your take would have been had you been there.
I'm not sure what Vega 64 pricing looks like right now.
400, I think, when I looked.
I would definitely buy this. Then. Yeah, if they're comparing this against the RTX 2070 in AMD slides that I'm looking at, Vega 64, don't buy last year tech to save $20 or whatever.
Yeah, RDNA, according to their marketing, they're showing RDNA versus GCN, looking at 50%. Same power, same configuration, and you're getting 50% more performance. So
something to consider about AMD launching these, $400 cards first rather than budget cards is, again, they're the first ones to 7 nanometer, and that's not cheap. So it makes sense to me for them not to launch, $200 graphics cards at 7 nanometer.
Also, we have another friend of the show from Hard OCP TV, still using that account. AMD has left a good bit of wiggle room in its pricing to give it the ability to react to NVIDIA, moving its stack pricing stratification. Also, no reason to leave money on the table out of the gate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. I just I can't see them. That's why 350 would have been pretty awesome, 450, 700, but it's not going to happen. Too new, too much performance for that money.
We'll see. I guess we're going to kind of have to talk about it in the next segment.
We'll talk about the next segment.
Yep.
Because things are going to get interesting soon, I think.
Although I do want to shift to the thing I talked about with Steve. I mean, if you say his name 3 times,
he just shows up behind you
with a halo.
But RTX, it really is interesting why everybody keeps asking about ray tracing right now, and then everybody's been beating on everybody for they hate ray tracing. We don't want it. It's fake. It's not real.
Gordon rant incoming.
But now everybody's like, "Oh, where's the ray tracing?"
Actually, I do have to say, Gordon, you did predict this. When RTX came out, you were like, "Hey, now once Navi comes out, people are going to be like, wait, but why doesn't it have ray tracing? Even though everyone dumped on the original RTX cards for having ray tracing." So we definitely did see plenty of comments saying like, "Oh, hey, why no ray tracing?" But also on stage, they were like, "Oh, well, we're going to give you performance and not just some sort of gimmick that doesn't help you in your daily games."
There for sure.
That's what I called like 6 months ago. That's how they're going to do it.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. Ray tracing is not established yet. It's picking up steam. It's still very much in the beginner stages. There were a few big announcements at E3, like I think it's Watch Dogs Legion and Cyberpunk are going to have ray tracing. There's still only a handful of games on it. If you pay attention to the console launches, AMD worked some sort of ray tracing hardware into those.
Yep.
But not in Navi. And I think that actually makes a lot of sense. Pardon me. Because consoles are designed to last forever. Like console generations are at least 5 years, right? And I would expect 5 or 6 years from now, there's a decent chance ray tracing will be a thing. Graphics cards are replaced much faster than consoles typically. So it makes sense to me that they don't put dedicated ray tracing hardware into Navi right now so that they can offer more performance to counter NVIDIA's cards that are loaded up with the technology that only works in a handful of games.
So, Brad, I have a question for you. One of the things that I've been wondering is that because ray tracing got mentioned with the custom, I guess, APU type parts that they're making for their console partners, do you think that's also what contributed to people asking about ray tracing? Because I feel like if AMD had kind of kept this pure, no ray tracing kind of approach, maybe it wouldn't necessarily be on people's minds. But I'm wondering if because they did it for the partners, but not their own actual cards for the PC gaming market, that's why people are like, hey, what, no ray tracing?
That makes sense. I did see people on, Reddit or Twitter or whatever, somewhere on the internet specifically reference that more than once. Like, oh, what? It's in the consoles. How come it's not in the graphics cards? So I think it did muddy the water a bit. I can understand why it happened. But, I don't consider it a black mark against them to not have ray tracing yet.
Yeah, and I agree. Somebody was calling me on YouTube. Was like, "Are you saying you're okay with 5700 XT not having?" Yeah, I mean, ray tracing is cool technology. It's clearly a path for the future that AMD, Intel are going to get behind as well. But you don't have to have it right now immediately. It's like you don't have to have a 12-core processor, right? You don't have You don't have to have a 16-core processor. If you need it, it's awesome, but it's also nice to have it when you get there, when you were like, oh, all the apps can actually use 12 cores. That's awesome. You're there ahead of it, right? But I just think I don't think you have to have ray tracing at the moment. But if you bought a card today, Brad, I mean, like Cyberpunk really kind of wowed everybody, right? Everybody was like, whoa.
Yeah, but I'm wowed by the game.
I was working on
if it has cooler, the reflections, a couple of screenshots they actually have with ray tracing, NVIDIA and CD Projekt released some screenshots, and it looks amazing actually with ray tracing in those couple of screenshots. But I mean, I like more performance. I like higher frame rates. I also like RTX technology in the higher end cards. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense to have ray tracing in the 2080 and stuff like that. But I'm fine with AMD making the decision to say, hey, we're going to give you higher frame rates and not invest all that money into that.
Yeah. I don't know, but I just kind of think it's going to be a really hard selection. We see with laptops right now where you have 1660 Ti laptops, slightly slower than 2060 laptops.
Weird.
And which one do you buy? One gives you sort of ray tracing performance. Not going 2060 in laptops is, especially Max Q, is not exactly going to wow you right now. So I don't know how to pick. How do you pick between if you have $500 to go buy a GPU, say 600, stretch it a little bit, so decent high end. What do you buy? You know, do you do ray tracing support on the hopes that when Cyberpunk comes out, you can play it?
Well, right now, I think the 1660 Ti on desktop, I think it's $280, $260, something like that. Whereas the RTX 2060 is $350, so it's a pretty significant jump up. So, I mean, it depends on, I guess, whether your budget can handle $70 for a gamble, just like always.
And the 2060 is.
Well, what?
Yeah.
What's up?
No, I'm just wondering if the 2060, if the ray tracing performance is good enough to keep you happy. I mean, I guess you run it at medium.
Are we talking about desktop or laptop?
Desktop. It's not. It's pretty slow on laptops versus desktop.
It'll depend on the game. Like something more intense, like Metro Exodus, I would probably not want to do a 2060 on. I'd rather probably skip it, but we'll see. One thing I found interesting about AMD's presentation is that you were there. I mean, they seem to say like their future plan for ray tracing, they see a lot of the heavy lifting actually happening in the cloud, which I don't know if that's just because they announced that Google Stadia win, but that I didn't expect to see that.
Yeah, I didn't. And it actually is a little bit of disconcerting to me because I'm sorry, I'm never going to accept something being done on a cloud and shut down my PC as my primary experience. As a supplementary, yeah, awesome. But I'm not going to.
Maybe for laptops.
No, I just don't see that, and it really is a little scary because I'm looking at this slide right here. Basically, their ray tracing vision, because they had to address this question, is shader. And actually, I'm not going to say who, but I was called out because my story said, "Hey, I don't think they said they were going to do ray tracing in GCN." Right? I'm like, oh, okay, I got to go back and check the tape on that. But shader ray tracing for GCN and RDNA is what the slide says. Pro render for creators, Radeon Rays for developers. So yeah, not for consumers. Got to go change that in my story. Hardware, select lighting effects for real-time gaming, next gen RDNA. And then the next one is cloud, right? Evolving. So full scene ray tracing, leveraging cloud computing. And it's that last one that really bugs the hell out of me. I really feel like the hardware is basically AMD's version of what we've got today with hybrid ray tracing. Because it's not going to be all done immediately. It's going to take years and years and years of work. But
I mean, here's the thing, though. I feel like the cloud, that may not necessarily be for us, which is a U.S. audience. I think in countries where they have super reliable, super fast internet, it could be a strong sort of feature there. Probably like your Asia markets.
Is this a console perspective here, Elena?
No, I'm serious. Like, we have horrible, like, infrastructure for broadband internet in the U.S.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. Like, living here, I don't really see cloud being something that you can really rely on dependably. Whereas if you're in South Korea, where like freaking everywhere has amazing internet, then yeah, maybe that could be a real thing there.
I don't know.
Sorry, not to derail this, but we are running out of time.
I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah, to finish up this stuff before we get to the NVIDIA stuff, there are some really good questions from the chat here. In this, during the Navi gaming benchmark, Vac Killers asked during the Navi gaming benchmark of World War Z, that on one side they were using DX11 for the 2070, and the 5700 XT was using Vulkan, which wasn't disclosed until the end of the video, and some people didn't notice that. What do we think about that?
Didn't they say something in the presentation about best versus best though? Do you think it's related to that?
I would hope. I would imagine
the CPU part.
That if you ran the NVIDIA card with Vulkan, it's not going to be as good. So I think that's
safe.
Okay. I think it's fair because you've got Vulkan, you've got a card that runs Vulkan. What are you going to not run it? You know, it's faster, so you're going to do it. It really that goes with I think that's best versus best. You know, I don't think that's any kind of like we're trying to not show our performance or cheat or anything. I think that's
as long as it's. Hopefully they did say best versus best. If they just did tack it on as a footnote at the end, it's like, But But yeah, I don't have any issue with that approach either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ryan's asking, what are your thoughts on AMD locking down the firmware on the 5700 XT and limiting overclocking as a result? I don't know where they're getting that.
I don't know enough about that.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm going to guess they don't want you to blow it up. Is usually.
Also, Hookster says if you're recommending somebody pick a 5700 XT over a Vega, would you also recommend the blower model or wait for third-party cooling systems?
If you have in general, I would wait for third party. But I mean, if you want a day one, you're gonna have to get the blower. If you have a small form factor PC, wait for you're gonna want the blower anyway. That being said, I always say wait for reviews. I wouldn't recommend anybody buy this yet until we know how it actually handles.
Yeah, always wait. Don't pre-order. But at the same time, I will say, I almost said NVIDIA. AMD did actually say, because I asked them, your blowers have traditionally just, sucked, right? Everybody said your blowers have, the ones with GeForce cards are actually pretty decent. Everybody's been pretty happy with them for the most part. Not as good as a big ass, Asus card, but for what they are, they're pretty good. AMD ones have traditionally been pretty horrible. And they said, yeah, we heard that. We've heard that sentiment from before, and we are working on that. This does address that. So they do say this card should be decently good. Whereas, yeah, we know you've always complained. I think they said they locked it down to 48 dB or something.
It can't get much worse. So I take their word on that.
Yeah, but they say, yeah, we heard you. They did try to do some work on this blower to make it much better. So we'll have to wait and see how sensitive Brad's ears are.
Testing Vega 64, it was actively unpleasant to be in the room, basically. Like, I gave it big marks off because it was like, and I test in a closed case. Like, I try to test in realistic scenarios, and I did not like it. Just was so bad.
Those 290X cards were pretty impressive, though. That was on the whatever mode they had. That was, yeah.
Also, we had some other people saying it, but also Just a Regular was pointing out that they did not think that the price for performance improvement for Navi was worth it. What's the point to moving to a brand new technology 7 nanometer if you're not going to adjust your price for performance?
I haven't had a chance to look too deeply into that. I head up our E3 coverage, so I've been very busy on that this week. Doesn't seem bad. Hey, man, I mean, Vega 64 wasn't really hanging with the 2070, but the XT does, and it's $450.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I don't remember the Vega 64 being like on equal footing with the 2070 at all. Would you? I mean, you got to
remember when Vega came out as well. Like, it has I forget the actual launch prices. It's been a couple years, but the actual launch prices, like what you're thinking back and thinking, like, oh, that was, let's say, a $500 card. The Vega 64. It was not. It was only available at launch in those weird ass bundles that come with games
and a monitor
and stuff like that for like $200 more. So you got to keep that in mind when you're looking back like that. Like, for months, you could only buy them in those weird ass bundles that cost an extra $100 or $200.
Got it. Well, the Navi stuff that came out was is supposed to be right in the ballpark of some of these NVIDIA cards, but what if NVIDIA changed their approach?
So they had something super faster?
Yeah, what we've heard some rumors.
We have.
Some super rumors.
Yeah. NVIDIA itself teased the something super is coming, had a little trailer out, just said super as a logo.
So what would that mean for AMD if these new cards are better?
Well, that will depend exactly what super winds up being. But yesterday, WCC F-Tech published a piece, take with a big grain of salt. I always take rumor posts with a big grain of salt. WCC F-Tech in particular, sometimes they are great at nailing rumors. Sometimes they are great at spectacularly failing at nailing those rumors. So definitely take it with a grain of salt. But according to their piece, basically, NVIDIA is going to launch super versions of its RTX lineup. So the RTX 2060, 2070, 2080, 2080 Ti, that basically takes the chips of the existing one, bumps them down for the same price, is basically what it's saying. So, like, the new RTX 2060 Super would actually have a 2070 chip inside of it. but still be priced like a 2060, and on down the stack, with the 2080 Ti at the top getting some sort of new chip
Wow.
that's more powerful than before. Yeah, they're saying there's going to be more flexibility for custom board makers to put their own VRMs in there to potentially, bolster performance that way too. Power unlocked. So it sounds pretty great according to that rumor. Again, take it with a grain of salt. But if NVIDIA does come out and do that, and AMD is positioning, the RX 5700 against the 2060 right now, and NVIDIA comes out with these super cards where all of a sudden the 2060 is a 2070, that's going to change things a lot.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm looking at this WCCF tech story now, and interesting.
What are the prices again right now for a 2060?
$350 is the baseline for 2060, I believe, and 2070 is $500.
Are they actually hitting that street price though?
I'm not sure. It's been a few weeks between Computex and whatnot that I've managed to check.
That would be really interesting. I don't know if it necessarily kill AMD's efforts before they even get out the gate, but it definitely will put a damper on it.
Well, like Kaya was saying, I think AMD left itself a lot of wiggle room in those prices. So if something like that does happen, it'd be a price war, which is great.
Great for us, for sure.
Well, but I mean, who would lose would be the people who just bought RTX cards. We have some people in the chat kind of.
You would still have a badass card.
No, but you could have, if you waited a week, you could have had
Gotten
even
more
better
for the same
of a
amount
card.
of money.
Yeah.
But that's unfortunate. That is what technology is.
I mean, that's
like.
that's kind of tech.
So.
But yeah, if that winds up being the case or something like that, I mean, that does sound pretty super actually. So I'm very interested to see. I expected NVIDIA to have an announcement because they teased that right before Computex. I was expecting an announcement either at Computex or at least E3, but we haven't heard anything. So
yeah, I was hoping for some sort of live stream or something, and no, nothing. I was curious, especially since Computex they streamed that live, right? The Computex one.
For the creator stuff, I believe so.
Yeah.
But there was, I don't believe this, whatever this super thing is. I don't think there's anything.
I was hoping for E3 there would be some sort of live stream, and then we would have gotten some big live streams during E3.
I'm just like looking at. It's funny. I was just looking at NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2080 Ti Super. Then you just keep adding words on there. There's like no more room on the card.
wait till you get to the partner ones where they start adding OC6G.
RGB.
That I wonder what that 2080 Ti Super would go for. I mean, that's just
super expensive.
Well, according to this piece, it's saying prices stay as is.
Prices
so basically,
stay as
if this piece is correct, what this piece is saying is that what is the 2080 Ti chip now is going into the 2080 for the 2080 price. And the 2080 Ti Super will be some sort of new chip that still has the same ridiculous price.
wow.
Crazy.
Those things are still going for over $1,200 on the street. Like that those $1,000 models never really happened.
Sorry, I haven't read the article. Does the article say anything about release schedule or anything? Some people are saying, should they wait?
They said it said
June, right?
Yeah, it said this article says that they're thinking the 21st, but it could be anywhere between now and the beginning of July would be an announcement.
So now's probably not a good time to just wait. Just wait a little bit to buy a graphics card.
Yeah.
If you're in the if you're in the mainstream range, if you're under $300, I think you probably we're not going to see much movement there. But if you're looking to buy a high end card and you can wait even a month just to see how everything shakes out, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, and you're going to want to wait anyway because you want to see how these new Navi parts do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Is it Navi or Navi?
Navi.
Navi. Wait, isn't that the same from that Cameron movie?
I thought you
Avatar. No, I would definitely wait anyway because you want to see how the new AMD cards do.
Yep, definitely.
Yep.
And I'm going to make another bold prediction here. Having now realized the reason why I can get the pricing right and all of the is because I'm so used to how the maneuvering. I'm so sensitive. It's like barometric pressure from Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA. I'm like, I understand if you were NVIDIA and you wanted to do the most effed up thing to your competition. You're like, hey, you're going to have a parade on July 7th. What day do you think you would release your card on? You know, I mean, that's like that. You can see that one coming from a mile away, right? That's the way it just.
So your
it just
bold
works.
prediction is that these all will release on 7/6.
It'll either be that or right after, because
That would be funny.
let's face it. I mean, NVIDIA's kind of mean to AMD, right? They're pretty mean to AMD with the launches, and they would kind of try to mess with each other. So I would predict that you would see more information on these cards trickling out up till then. Leaks of how fast it is, and then probably a launch designed to, like, you know, I've made this many times before. Hey, you having a party on Friday? Unfortunately, I'm having a party too. Oh, Beyonce's going to be there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
NVIDIA is super clever too. Like, you don't
Super
even see
clever.
some of the behind the scenes stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if they time it in a way so that the reviews come after Navi, but reviewers have these cards in hand while they're testing Navi, but can't talk about it.
yes. Because then you know you have that part. You know the embargo breaks after that part.
Yeah.
It's going to affect how you write the review. No reviewer is going to write it in a vacuum because they don't want to tell you this part is not going to exist when they know it exists. You can't compartmentalize it.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, we'll see how your prediction plays out, but we have to run.
We do.
Gordon. We have to run. I'm
No
sorry,
Q&A,
people.
sorry,
No
everybody.
Q&A. You've got plenty of great questions. Keep them in the Discord, or I will keep them in the Discord, and we will get to them. I promise. I promise. So let's get out of here, Gordon.
sorry, I just closed that page I needed to read off.
That's fine. Do it from memory. You got it.
Check back next week for
There you
your
go.
fix of PC hardware. Here we go. Oh, no, I went to the wrong page. On the Full Nerd for audio listeners, subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Send
Good
questions and comments to the Full Nerd at PCWorld.com. PCWorld.com. Every time you do, NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel mess with each other. Thanks for coming. I'm Gordon Ung with Brad Charkis,
Adios.
Elaine Yee,
Bye, everyone.
and Patrick Mears can hit the off switch.
We got to run to a meeting. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Yeah, God, that is right.